Hello, Mother. Something smells good.
Good morning, sweetie. I'm making breakfast for you. Can you clean the bacon pan for me?
Sure thing. No, Billy, don't do it. It's bad for your pipes and bad for the environment.
Don't listen to him, Billy. Just pour it down the drain and forget about it. What's a little grease going to do?
Actually, there's a lot that grease can do to damage your home and the environment. Picture this. When you decide to pour fats, oils, or grease down the drain, you are letting those substances harden up and stick to your pipe walls, causing clogs and backups in your home that can eventually lead to expensive repairs. And can also cause gross smells and a nasty situation for your neighborhood and the environment.
You can smell it.
Instead, when the substance cools down, stick it in a plastic container. Make sure the lid is sealed tight and drop it off at your nearest cooking oil recycling station in Hillsborough County. That way, you're helping the environment and saving your family money, so they could buy you that new skateboard you've always wanted.
All right.
It's a win-win for everyone.
New skateboard? Oh, yeah. Your way is definitely better than mine. Let's recycle that grease.
For more information on how you can recycle your fats, oils, or grease, visit hcflgov.net/core.
You know what I like about my morning commute? It's time to reflect. Ponder those big questions. Who are we? Why are we here? Sometimes you just gotta take those bumps in the road and keep on moving forward.
Dude, you couldn't possibly be any more wrong. Stop the car.
That's deep, like me. I can respect that.
Dude, it's a pothole. I could report it to Hillsborough County right now as a customer service request. Just choose your service and select the issue. Your browser pinpoints the problem, and you can add any important information and even take a picture. It puts Hillsborough County at your service 24/7.
Well, all right.
So you have now completed your emergency plan for your family. How about a plan for this family member? Protect your pets during a disaster by including them in your family's emergency plan. Start by making your pet a disaster kit. Put all paperwork into a large Ziploc bag, including a picture of you and your pet, your contact information, vaccination information, and special care instructions. In addition, you should pack certain items to help your pet during the emergency. A 7-day supply of food with bowls, a travel crate, and your pet's favorite toy. Remember, shelters are the place of last resort. Your plan should include being far away from the disaster's epicenter. But if you do find yourself at the shelter, know the rules. Once at the shelter, your pet will be placed in a designated animal section. This is for your pet's safety, as well as other shelter residents. Knowing the shelter rules helps everyone stay safe during an emergency. For more information about shelters, their location, rules, and how to get ready for a disaster, go to hcflgov.net/staysafe.
Hello, Mother. Something smells good.
Good morning, sweetie. I'm making breakfast for you. Can you clean the bacon pan for me?
Sure thing. No, Billy, don't do it. It's bad for your pipes and bad for the environment.
Don't listen to him, Billy. Just pour it down the drain and forget about it. What's a little grease going to do?
Actually, there's a lot that grease can do to damage your home and the environment. Picture this. When you decide to pour fats, oils, or grease down the drain, you are letting those substances harden up and stick to your pipe walls, causing clogs and backups in your home that can eventually lead to expensive repairs. And can also cause gross smells and a nasty situation for your neighborhood and the environment.
You can smell it.
Instead, when the substance cools down, stick it in a plastic container. Make sure the lid is sealed tight and drop it off at your nearest cooking oil recycling station in Hillsborough County. That way, you're helping the environment and saving your family money, so they could buy you that new skateboard you've always wanted.
All right.
It's a win-win for everyone.
New skateboard? Oh yeah! Your way is definitely better than mine. Let's recycle that grease.
For more information on how you can recycle your fats, oils, or grease, visit hcflgov.net/core.
You know what I like about my morning commute? It's time to reflect. Ponder those big questions. Who are we? Why are we here? Sometimes you just gotta take those bumps in the road and keep on moving forward.
Dude, you couldn't possibly be any more wrong. Stop the car.
That's deep, like me. I can respect that.
Dude, it's a pothole. I could report it to Hillsborough County right now as a customer service request. Just choose your service and select the issue. Your browser pinpoints the problem, and you can add any important information and even take a picture. It puts Hillsborough County at your service 24/7.
Well, all right.
So you have now completed your emergency plan for your family. How about a plan for this family member? Protect your pets during a disaster by including them in your family's emergency plan. Start by making your pet a disaster kit. Put all paperwork into a large Ziploc bag, including a picture of you and your pet, your contact information, vaccination information, and special care instructions. In addition, you should pack certain items to help your pet during the emergency. A 7-day supply of food with bowls, a travel crate, and your pet's favorite toy. Remember, shelters are the place of last resort. Your plan should include being far away from the disaster's epicenter. But if you do find yourself at the shelter, know the rules. Once at the shelter, your pet will be placed in a designated animal section. This is for your pet's safety, as well as other shelter residents. Knowing the shelter rules helps everyone stay safe during an emergency. For more information about shelters, their location, rules, and how to get ready for a disaster, go to hcflgov.net/staysafe.
Hello, Mother. Something smells good.
Good morning, sweetie. I'm making breakfast for you. Can you clean the bacon pan for me?
Sure thing. No, Billy, don't do it. It's bad for your pipes and bad for the environment.
Don't listen to him, Billy. Just pour it down the drain and forget about it. What's a little grease going to do?
Actually, there's a lot that grease can do to damage your home and the environment. Picture this. When you decide to pour fats, oils, or grease down the drain, you are letting those substances harden up and stick to your pipe walls, causing clogs and backups in your home that can eventually lead to expensive repairs. And can also cause gross smells and a nasty situation for your neighborhood and the environment.
You can smell it.
Instead, when the substance cools down, stick it in a plastic container. Make sure the lid is sealed tight and drop it off at your nearest cooking oil recycling station in Hillsborough County. That way, you're helping the environment and saving your family money, so they could buy you that new skateboard you've always wanted.
Alright.
It's a win-win for everyone.
New skateboard? Oh yeah! Your way is definitely better than mine. Let's recycle that grease.
For more information on how you can recycle your fats, oils, or grease, visit hcflgov.net/core.
You know what I like about my morning commute? It's time to reflect. Ponder those big questions. Who are we? Why are we here? Sometimes you just gotta take those bumps in the road and keep on moving forward.
Dude, you couldn't possibly be any more wrong. Stop the car.
That's deep, like me. I can respect that.
Dude, it's a pothole. I could report it to Hillsborough County right now as a customer service request. Just choose your service and select the issue. Your browser pinpoints the problem, and you can add any important information and even take a picture. It puts Hillsborough County at your service 24/7.
Well, all right.
So you have now completed your emergency plan for your family. How about a plan for this family member? Protect your pets during a disaster by including them in your family's emergency plan. Start by making your pet a disaster kit. Put all paperwork into a large Ziploc bag, including a picture of you and your pet, your contact information, vaccination information, and special care instructions. In addition, you should pack certain items to help your pet during the emergency. A 7-day supply of food with bowls, a travel crate, and your pet's favorite toy. Remember, shelters are the place of last resort. Your plan should include being far away from the disaster's epicenter. But if you
Good morning. We're here for the Tampa Bay Transportation Management Area Leadership Group meeting. It's representing the MPOs of Pasco, Pinellas, and Hillsborough counties, Friday, February 8th. And we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I don't see. There's the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I've not been in this room since I was a citizen, so I didn't even remember where it was or what. I was really surprised that the only thing I knew was the room across there, and did not know I was going to be chairing till this minute, so that's okay. But so we will just work through this. Yes, thank you. Okay, so we can start with introductions around the table, maybe that side.
You use the big microphone, and when you're ready to speak, you hit the red button. That one's.
I was told this is not working. Randy DeShazzo. I'm sitting in for Sean Sullivan from Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council.
David Green, Executive Director, T-BARDA.
David Gwynn, District 7 FDOT Secretary.
Janet Scherberger, Tampa International Airport. Kimberly Overman, Board of County Commission, MPO.
Pat Kemp, Board of County Commissioners, and MPO, Hillsborough County.
Beth Alden, Director of the Hillsborough MPO.
Whit Blanton with Ford Pinellas.
Janet Long, Pinellas County Commissioner and a member of Forward Pinellas in Pinellas County.
Jack Mariano, Pasco County Commission.
John Villeneuve, Pasco County, MPO.
So thank you to everyone for being here this morning. We'll take public comment now. We only have one public comment that's signed up. If anyone else would like to comment after that, they're welcome to. Tom Nocera.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Good morning. I want to take just a second to talk about one of the roles of leadership, since this group is about leadership. And back when I was in graduate school at Western Michigan University back in the 80s, I had a professor named Shirley Van Hoven who introduced me to a Canadian professor named Henry Mintzberg, who had done a lot of research work on the roles of a leader. And the role that I want to just briefly outline for you today is the role of a leader that deals with being a facilitator, helping pave the way to make things easier for the teams that they lead, and to focus on how to do things more efficiently by being that person that you can go to get things guidance-wise or whatever to make things easier for the people that work under you. I know that today one of the topics that we're going to talk about is going to be the long-range plan. And I just wanted to ask you to help facilitate within that long-range plan the concepts and the very real technologies that are being commercialized today by our vendor SkyTran with regard to aerial personal rapid transit. I think that any plan that comes out of this group that doesn't include an aerial personal rapid transit component is going to be short-sighted, a waste of money and a waste of people's energy when they see the system operating. And I'm told that we're going to see the system operating in San Antonio, Texas by the end of the summer at speeds up to 100 miles an hour. So it's not that far off on the horizon right now. We're doing everything that we can to get a pilot project in Clearwater ready to roll out. And SkyTran will be here within a few weeks, I think, to meet with us again. And hopefully at that time we'll have more information that we can share publicly. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Regional Long Range Transportation Plan Development. Sarah McKinley presenting.
Morning, TMA.
You're not Sarah.
I am not Sarah. I am Johnny Wong, Hillsborough MPO staff. I'm standing in for Sarah to discuss the Tri-County element of the three MPOs' respective forthcoming long-range transportation plans. So late last summer, we engaged the Tri-County region to provide us with feedback on their transportation priorities. As a result, more than 10,000 people completed the survey to rate 3 different scenarios of the future, and that survey included 20 planning strategies, which ranged from roadways and transit to community and funding. At the November TMA meeting, Lisa Silva and Jim Meyer came here to summarize the results to you, and today I'm going to be briefing you on how our shared vision of the future might be included into each of our respective long-range plans. What we're really talking about here are processes that might lead us toward adopting a shared vision of the Tri-County area. From the survey results, we were able to conclude that across all 3 counties, respondents favored facilitating reinvestment in traditional neighborhoods to maintain community character. They also responded favorably toward revitalizing or strengthening downtowns by mixing office space and housing options near transit stations. And lastly, efficiently using land to minimize outward growth into rural areas. One process that we suggest to see these types of growth pattern preferences be accomplished is by encouraging the local governments that the MPOs serve to adopt these guiding principles into their comprehensive plans. In our respective long-range plans, the MPOs might consider options for incorporating various rail transit types into the Tri-County vision. The transit types that garnered the most support from our survey include passenger rail connecting the TMA area to the Orlando Metro and then beyond, streetcar service, or possibly some other type of fixed guideway transit using mostly existing rail lines or dedicated transit lanes along major corridors. And respondents also favored making express bus and BRT connections across the TMA with service running frequently. Among the roadway elements in the survey, the feedback communicated to us was that we should continue to explore elevated express lane projects on limited access facilities to create a tri-county system. Some of the options include elevated express lanes through the downtown Tampa interchange. Pasco County has already been discussing elevated lanes as a possible strategy at the interchange of SR 54 and US 41. And respondents also preferred tolled express lanes as a congestion relief tool rather than as a tool of revenue generation. Some other important messages that we received from the survey are that improved ramps should be placed at bottlenecks. Walk and bike facilities are critical to the region and should be a significant component of that tri-county vision. At this time, there's not widespread public support for converting I-275 to a boulevard north of the downtown interchange, downtown Tampa interchange that is. And there is support to explore transportation technologies if they can be safely implemented within a 20-year time frame. The map in your packet and shown on the screen is a draft of what could become the Tri-County vision. This map includes projects that received positive feedback in the survey. The orange circles represent new interchanges, and all 3 are located along the I-75 corridor. The red circles represent intermodal centers. The green lines are express bus corridors. The dark blue are express toll lanes. The light blue are water ferries. The purple broken lines are rail transit. and the orange broken line is the passenger rail to the Orlando Metro. As far as next steps, the next steps in the plan development process are that all of the counties in District 7 we are working together to update our regional travel demand model. That model allows us to forecast traffic demand at the regional scale and test the system-wide effects of each of the transportation projects that are included in that tri-county vision. Each MPO will be tasked with estimating the cost of the transportation projects to be included in their respective long-range plans, and they'll also be responsible for forecasting future revenues available for those projects. In determining cost feasibility of those projects, it's important to note that some of those projects in that tri-county vision are already included in FDOT's Strategic Intermodal System Plan, and they are prioritized at the state level by DOT. Others will require a local funding source or even interlocal agreements to do cost sharing across jurisdictions. With the draft cost feasible plans prepared, each MPO will be responsible for doing another round of outreach this summer to gain feedback on those priorities. And we think that it might be useful for this group to have a discussion about how to fund those projects that are listed in that tri-county vision map. And finally, before the end of the year, each MPO will have to adopt their respective cost feasible plans. We've been having discussions about how to incorporate the same consistent and uniform tri-county element into each of our long-range plans. Some of the topics that we think might be included are corridors of regional significance, how to move transit projects forward, the results of the tri-county vulnerability assessment that you're going to hear about later this meeting, what technologies to pursue, how to coordinate environmental consultation processes across county lines and with environmental and natural resource agencies, and whatever other topics that the TMA feels are important to include. That concludes it. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions? Seeing no questions, I guess we can. So we have defining regional priorities. And you're Chelsea?
Yes, I'm Chelsea Favre. I'm with Forward Pinellas. I want to talk to you today about our priority process. Previously, ever since the TMA was conceived, we've come up with a list of a top 5 priorities to advance for funding at the state level. We started off with a very kind of complicated scoring process to evaluate what kind of projects we should put on that list. Over the course of the years, though, you'll see on the screen, it was in your packet, the priority projects that we adopted in 2018. You can see it's a pretty extensive list. It includes a lot of needs for the region, but not immediate priorities. And because of that, we've had a really hard time kind of advancing these projects forward. Some of them are not very well defined. The list includes a lot more than top 5 priority projects. So we want to recommend that we take a little bit of a different approach to priorities this year. Some of the priority criteria that we had in the past, we looked at initial screening questions to determine, does the project have support at the local level? Is there a local match available for that project? Does the project have consider regional connectivity, or is it wholly contained just within one project? We also looked at the multimodal character of those projects. You know, does it serve more than one mode of transportation, or is it really limited to just, say, automobile or just transit access? And we also considered the ability of the project to leverage other funding. So because of the way the priority list is developed, what staff is recommending is that we recognize all of the transportation needs for the region as a TMA, and then we really pick those top priorities. What are those 5 projects that we can kind of immediately send, say, to your local MPO, to the state, to the legislature, and say, these are the ones that we need funding for and we want funding for right now. But let's come back and look at that list every year so that we can make sure that we have kind of a continuous queue of projects that are ready to go and not just a stagnant kind of everything plus the kitchen sink list that we're looking at. So in the regional context, this is again that map that Johnny showed you. We've funded quite a few of the TMA priorities in the past. We've had the Howard Franklin Bridge, Gateway Expressway, a couple of interchanges on I-75 in both Pasco and Hillsborough counties, operational improvements on I-4, and also not included on this list are some operational express lane improvements in Pinellas County. So we've had some success so far. So what those top 5 priorities that staff is recommending right now, those are listed on the screen below, and I'm going to walk through each of those for you. So one of the top priorities that we'd like to advance is the State Road 6275 interchange. This is that interchange in the West Shore area where the Howard Franklin Bridge comes in near the airport. This would reconstruct the entire interchange to alleviate the bottleneck coming off of I-275. It would include ramps from Kennedy Boulevard to TIA, and also improve some new local connections under I-275. The second project is I-75 at Overpass Road in Pasco County, and I didn't highlight it, but it's up here in this area. Currently, there is an improvement planned and funded for that interchange, but it's kind of a step one. So what Pasco County would like to do is advance the funding for the ultimate construction of that interchange that includes additional ramps that are not currently funded for construction. In I-75 at Gibsonton in Hillsborough County, that is also a top priority to alleviate congestion and significant backups in that area. The fourth priority that we're looking to advance are operational improvements along I-275. This is from the downtown interchange going north past Barris Ave. That would include noise walls, operational improvements, some modifications to ramps and whatnot to improve traffic flow in that area. And then also the Central Avenue Bus Rapid Transit. While this project is currently in the queue for funding, it does not currently have all of the funding that it needs. It's not guaranteed, so we believe from a regional perspective, it's important to kind of keep this on everyone's radar and to continue to push it forward so that it can get the funding that it needs. So again, we'd really like to kind of advance this map as kind of the needs for the region. We recognize that there are so many projects across the region that are important for both local and regional connectivity, but really just looking at those top 5 priorities that we can go ahead and say, all right, these are ready to go. We'd like funding on these projects right now. So for our next steps, we'd like to open it up to the TMA leadership group to have discussion. Staff will go and make any adjustments to those top 5 priorities as we see fit. Then we'll be bringing this back to you at April for your approval, and then by July, each of the MPOs will be endorsing that list and transmitting it to the State Department of Transportation for funding consideration. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Are there any questions about this list? Commissioner Overman?
Thank you. I did have a question on the location of the I-75 overpass.
Yes. That is right up here just south of State Road 52.
And what intersection is that?
It's Overpass Road. It's actually called Overpass Road.
Oh, okay. Okay, maybe I just missed something.
How convenient.
Okay, well, that's handy. Well, that answers that question. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? Commissioner Mariano, did you have a question?
No, I'm good.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions, we can, move forward here. Approaches to regional coordination.
Commissioner Kim, if I may,
Yes.
just to remind everybody that this is a preliminary discussion of this list, and it'll be at your April meeting when we'll be asking you to take action on this list. And that's consistent with our schedule for transmitting priority projects to the Florida Department of Transportation that each of the MPOs will do. So we're building in a little time for each MPO to then endorse the recommendation from this body. So just a little reminder of the process.
Thank you. So approaches to regional coordination, Ms. Alden, Hillsborough MPO, and Whit Blanton, Forward Pinellas.
Good morning again. So today we're going to be following up on our discussion at our last meeting about where we go from here with our regional coordination process. So I'm going to start off with a quick recap of where we were last time we got together, which was at the beginning of November, where we talked about our decision-making process with a meeting chair that chair would rotate with the meeting location. We did not make a decision about a voting structure. We did look at 3 different options for a voting structure. And we talked about the number of steps that would be needed to formalize the existence of the TMA leadership group. There are a bunch of them. We would need to clarify our role with respect to the MPO Chairs Coordinating Committee, clarify our public comment and public engagement process, clarify how our decision-making process relates to each of the MPO's decision-making processes, just something that, a question that has been raised through the best practices study. We talked about drafting bylaws for the leadership group and potentially updating each MPO's bylaws to recognize the TMA and what its role is in the decision-making process. We talked about our non-voting advisors, who they would be, potentially expanding that group, including adjacent MPOs. We had a pretty lengthy discussion at our last meeting. I also wanted to highlight a couple of ideas from the Regional Planning and Coordination Best Practices Study, since those recommendations were released since the last time we got together. And so this is the slide from that presentation that shows potentially looking at a single MPO policy board as a longer range concept around 2030. But in the meantime, identifying some ways that we can strengthen our regional coordination at a technical and a kind of a process level. So some ideas, working together on technical analysis and data collection. And you heard from Johnny in his discussion about the Tri-County Long-Range Transportation Plan, that we're already, I think, well on the way towards that with our regional approach to travel demand modeling and growth forecasting. So some of the other recommendations were creating regional seats for our modal agencies, and what was meant by that was like the Aviation Authority, the Port Tampa Bay Port Authority, since those are regional assets. We also had the recommendation to create a single Citizens Advisory Committee, a single regional performance-based planning process, formalize our regional transportation plan element. So a number of steps. And I think we have almost a full house now. So at our workshop, at the Regional Planning Best Practices workshop in October, we talked about how do we bring together all these different ideas that have surfaced about a great regional coordination process, and does it matter what it's called? I think the example was with transit. Is it is a regional transit line? Is it called BRT? Is it called Express Bus? Doesn't matter what we call it. We need a strategy. You could call it a pink unicorn. It doesn't matter. We need some kind of regional connection, and we need that in our regional coordination process as well. So what is it that we really need to accomplish? And we can work out the terminology for it later. So here's some questions to think about as we work on our path forward. What is mandatory for us in terms of regional coordination? What assets do we have in place right now? Because we do have two regional groups of MPOs, the MPO Chairs Coordinating Committee and the TMA Leadership Group, and both came out of requests from Tallahassee to consider merging the MPOs that happened at different times. The MPO Chairs Coordinating Committee was not explicitly discussed in the recent best practices study. So today I'm going to recap some of what it does so that we can look at that as an asset for our use as we try to create our pink unicorn. I think we should also be thinking about what are we good at and what can we improve. So starting off with what is mandatory, there's a map at each of your places that shows the currently designated census urbanized areas. So the federal regulations for MPOs say the following about this. Where part of an urbanized area served by one MPO extends into an adjacent metropolitan planning area, the planning area served by the neighboring MPO, the MPOs shall, at a minimum, establish written agreements that clearly identify areas of coordination and the division of transportation planning responsibilities among and between the MPOs. So what that means for us, looking at our urbanized areas, is that the Spring Hill urbanized area served by the Hernando Citrus, is it an MPO or a TPO? I forget how it changed the name. That urbanized area extends well into Pasco County, so therefore there must be a written agreement about planning coordination between the Pasco MPO and the Hernando Citrus MPO. On Hillsborough's east border, the Lakeland urbanized area has already crept across the line into Hillsborough, and our urbanized area of Plant City is right at the border. So by the time we get to the 2020 census, they're both going to be well on either side of the border. So that means that we at Hillsborough and the Polk TPO have to have a written interlocal agreement for planning coordination. And then when you look down at the border between Hillsborough and Manatee, Hillsborough's urbanized area is actually at the border already with the 2010 urbanized area designations. And in Hillsborough, we have a lot of growth going on in the southern part of Hillsborough County right now. We are hearing about it every day, about the growth of traffic congestion in southern Hillsborough County. So it is only a matter of time, and it might be 2 years from now when the 2020 census numbers come out, that it's going to be clear that we have to have a written planning agreement between the Hillsborough MPO and the Sarasota Manatee MPO. Now, on the bright side, we already have a written interlocal agreement between all of those MPOs. That's the interlocal agreement that establishes the MPO Chair's Coordinating Committee. So getting into our list of assets, the CCC does have a track record of funded projects based on CCC priorities, particularly multi-use trails and the Transportation Regional Incentive Program. It does have a track record of jointly produced plans that were based on federal regulations for MPO planning process. It does have a formal interlocal agreement and adopted operational procedures. So it has those bylaws in place that we would still need to craft for the TMA leadership group. It has a voting structure. The voting structure is one MPO, one vote. It has an iterative approval process with the member MPOs. So in that conversation about what is the relationship between regional decision-making and the decision-making that happens at each MPO, and does each MPO retain authority over the essential investment decisions in its jurisdictional area? The CCC has a process for dealing with this. And that is that the CCC identified regional needs and priorities. Each MPO then figured out how to fund those as it could using the resources in its area, and provided a public process to vet those priorities. Then they came back to the regional level for adoption of a plan. And that's how we had a regional plan that was consistent with each MPO's plan. Is there a point of clarification? It's all of the ones on your map there. It's all of those. Okay, so Citrus Hernando, just served by one MPO. Pasco is one MPO, Pinellas, Hillsborough, Polk TPO, and the Sarasota Manatee MPO. So it's 8 counties and 6 MPOs. The CCC has for a long time established a public participation process, so dealt with things like public notice, how do we handle public comments, and has a process in place for sharing financial resources among the MPOs to produce these major planning documents. So it has a lot of that infrastructure. Maybe what it was lacking was more dialogue among the MPOs, so that there was a broader and deeper understanding of the different perspectives from around the region, and also a deeper discussion of what we have in common and need to work together on. And that's something that the TMA leadership group has spent a lot of time on over the last 5 years. And I think it has been really successful in that regard. I think it created new relationships between the board members of the 3 MPOs. It created deeper understanding of where they were coming from. And it built a lot of energy to move towards solutions. We've also been hearing about what can we improve. And one of the things that I've been hearing about is that we have a lot of regional groups. Do we need them all? It seems a little confusing. And there are a lot of meetings. Could we be more efficient with our regional planning process? And we've talked for years about the need to communicate a compelling vision, a feasible vision, a multimodal vision for the region. And I think that goal is still out there. And we've talked also that in order to make things like transit happen, we may need new agreements between the counties to implement the vision. There are also things that never really got visited with our CCC process. The CCC was required to create a dispute resolution process. It was never used. That might be something that we could come back to as a topic and have available to us all. And I'm sure everybody has some more ideas. And I'll come back to that. I have one more slide. So here are some suggestions from the staff level about how to streamline the regional process and use the organizational assets that we have in place right now. So we'd suggest using the MPO Chairs Coordinating Committee structure as a base, because it has all of that infrastructure in place right now. One point there is that we need to clarify the CCC's relationship with TBARDA. The CCC predates TBARDA by about 15 years, but after TBARDA was created, again, we were trying to streamline the regional process, so we merged the CCC with TBARDA. Then a couple of years ago, TBARDA was changed, so where we used to have only one different county in terms of our geographic area. Now TBARDA is missing 3 of our counties. And TBARDA is focusing on public transit, where the MPOs are charged with a multimodal planning process that has continued to include highways, robust planning for a regional multi-use trail system. So there are these questions about what our relationship with TBARDA is moving forward. And one question I wanted to put to you is, should the MPOs reestablish responsibility for a regional multimodal plan? But coming back to what the TMA leadership group has done well, I think it benefits all of us if we build in some time for us to have broader discussions, including multiple board members from each MPO. So some suggestions there, maybe we annually reconvene the TMA leadership group. Maybe we also arrange some joint board meetings among at least 2 MPO boards on an as-needed basis. There are different issues in different parts of the region that cross borders. And in terms of the timing, we would suggest changing our structure in 2020. So we would continue our TMA meetings this year to allow us to focus on the tri-county element of our long-range transportation plan. Next year, the District 1 MPOs, and again, that's Polk and Sarasota Manatee, they're going to be updating their long-range plans next calendar year. So that would be a great time to come back to the CCC process, have maybe 4 CCC meetings and only 1 TMA leadership group meeting, and expand our regional plan to the full area that the CCC used to prepare plans for. The CCC meets again in the summer, and so starting in 2020 would also give us the opportunity to talk about this at the CCC level with Hernando Citrus, Polk, and Sarasota Manatee at their summer meeting. So that concludes my presentation, and certainly would invite your feedback on any of these topics. What can we improve? What have we done well? What is mandatory? What does that mean? And how can we streamline and strengthen our regional process?
Is there anyone who would like to comment or?
And I'm going to sit back down because it's a group discussion, hopefully.
Madam Chair?
Yes. You might want to stay, Beth, you might want to stay there for a few minutes at least, if people have questions about what you said.
Sure.
So, I'm not really sure who to direct my comment to, but it seems to me that the legislature really formalized the structure and the regional aspect of transportation when they revisited how they wanted T-BARTA to work. And given that we have the current and future leaders of the legislature from within our region, seems to me we might want to stick with that model for just a little bit, considering the fact that that's a huge advantage to us throughout our 8-county region.
So continue to work with T-BARTA.
Well, that's mandated in the statute. Unless I'm reading the statute wrong, someone feel free to correct me. Whit?
No, you're not. So to that
David?
point, we certainly acknowledge the role that T-BARTA plays, and we want to strengthen that relationship. I think there's a lot we can continue to work on the relationship of the MPO long-range plan and the projects that T-BARTA advances, because the issue is that MPOs are federally created organizations to direct federal transportation dollars primarily into your region. And T-BARTA is a state-created entity that's primarily aimed at transit. So there's clearly a connection. But it seems to me that T-BARTA is a component of the overall big picture of how we plan transportation in the region. And it's not the other way around. That's just my way of looking at it. And certainly, you know.
That's because you're an MPO.
That's because but again, we have a broader perspective of highways, all forms of transit as well, and multi-use trails. And we've been doing that for a long time. And not all of those things are a T-BARTA responsibility. Just to clarify that.
Other comments? Commissioner Eggers?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the only other comment that I would make, and just throwing it out there, is that there was discussion at some level, be it the state level, that wanted the 3 counties to form an MPO, so that even if we were to go forward with a broader, charge here, that at some point, someone's vision, I'm not sure whose, but someone's vision was that these 3 counties form one MPO. And then what we've been doing for the last few years is trying to do something short of that by having this TMA group. And so if we're going to not lose sight of that, I think there has to be a stronger role of the TMA to continue moving down that parallel path to either create that joint MPO or not. And if it's not going to do that, then I think the broader discussion probably needs to take center stage, so to speak. But I mean, I think there's 2 different things going here, and one is to how do we deal with it in the short run, but then long run, is there really energy to create one MPO with the 3 counties? So that's all. Thank
you. In terms of that, I just think the point of clarification that MPOs, again, are they're creatures of federal law, not state law, so there can be no mandate by the state. I just like that clarified, so that, because I think there's all kinds of confusion about this.
If I can address that real
Yes.
quickly, there are state statutes that govern MPOs, and it's actually in state statute that gives the state the authority to change the composition of MPOs. We're one of only 2 states in the country, I think, that have that provision. So the legislature can certainly change the designation of MPOs under state law.
You're saying the legislature could choose to merge?
The legislature can. There's like one clause in the state
Right.
statute that deals with that.
I think there'd be a lot of problems with that, but
I agree
anyway.
with you.
I'll
Because
wait
that's
for
really a
Secretary
jump in
Quinn.
jurisdiction. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I just want to add something,
Secretary, go
Commissioner,
ahead.
about the state, and I think there has been a lot of confusion on this. The regional study that was originally funded was because of what we thought was going to be a mandate from the federal government telling us
Right.
that we had to do these things. So the genesis of the study was not to try to force an MPO, it was to say, how do we do that if this is going to be the requirement placed on us? We have no desire to force or to make it seem like we're pushing for a single MPO. We'll work with whatever the structure is. The only thing we were looking for was sort of a regional consensus among those MPOs in certain areas so that when we compete for strategic intermodal system funding, that we're competing on an equal basis with other regions who may be speaking with a different voice. We don't have any agendas. Whatever way you all want to do it is fine with us. We're not, but it was all because we thought we were going to have to do it.
Commissioner Starkey.
I see, some things we do in the MPO are very localized, and some things we do have a regional impact. And so I see a benefit in having regional meetings on those things that have regional impact. So I think a great first step is to convene MPOs from neighboring areas. I think that's an easy, non-controversial thing to do. So I'd love to meet with the Pinellas County MPO or the Hillsborough MPO or all three at the same time, and anyone else. But for example, yesterday we had a ribbon cutting of the Anklote Coastal Trail in Pasco County, and we had people that came from Pinellas County because that is a trail that is connecting to the Pinellas Trail. And it's a way that maybe one day some of our residents there will commute to Tarpon Springs by bike instead of getting on US 19. So I see great value in that, and I see that as an easy first step.
So I was just going to add, I think part of the frustration too is that I think when Tabarda was more regional prior to transit, we had a much better opportunity to use them as our regional body, but their scope has been narrowed. So, I mean, I thank FDOT because I think over the years, if it wasn't for FDOT encouraging regionalism and encouraging and funding regional projects, I don't think we would have made much headway. So I think we have to find a proper body to do it. We have to continue to do it. How we define it is one thing, but I think that has to go on. We still use our partners, but we just have to redefine what that body is. But I don't think we can rely totally on FDOT and Tabarda to continue to carry that for us. So this is maybe an opportunity for us to step out and find the right forum for that. But it needs to be done. I think we all agree on that.
Madam Chair, I have a question. So, given the comments that have just been made, is it possible to do something as simple as an interlocal agreement with our MPOs within this region? I mean, that's
Sure,
kind of
we
what
have
we're
one.
doing here.
I'm actually confused as to what any of the comments meant in terms of reorganizing. I'll tell you, for me, just as 2 years of being on TBARTA, TMA, my MPO, the MPO CCC now, and I'm trying to think, is there any? Yes, thank you. I thought I said the TMA. Yeah. It's just, and as you, I think so, clearly, although it's so difficult to point out, but kind of the overlapping missions, area of concerns, jurisdiction, it is just a scramble. And I have felt that as far as it being a transit advocate, that this area, I know for a fact, now the surtax we have in Hillsborough County, when it comes due, we'll change that. But we've been the most underfunded transit region, county in the U.S., in the whole country, compared to none. But I've always felt that, I've started to feel, I didn't realize this at first, that we are the most per capita over bureaucratic place that I could ever imagine, with a lack of jurisdiction, funds, and I think it just is a confusing and ineffective way of us to use our time and energy in order to promote what might be our mission, which is, and it's part of it's been created by the state coming in and doing things and mandating without any kind of resources, so that, you know, that mandate doesn't really make a difference in terms of what gets done. I thought, I've been shocked every time I go to a different meeting, and I say to Beth, what is this again? Tell me what their jurisdiction is and what is the deciding mission here. I think moving back to the federally mandated, is it federally mandated, the MPOCCCs?
So it's just this
That
language.
it goes back to that. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think the MPOCCC structure, at least something to start with, makes far more sense in terms of dealing what we should deal with.
So we could have individual agreements between the MPOs that are adjacent to each other. We could do it that way. But the CCC was created so that we could all talk to each other.
Right. And the thing about the CCC is it covers all things. You know, T-BARTA is just transit in 3 different counties. The TMA is different things in all 3 counties with different kind of representation. I was kind of surprised when I found out that Manatee is part of T-BARTA, but actually it's a merged MPO with Manatee and Sarasota. So those 2 are part of the MPO-CCC. I think we've created a tangle here that's really, that we need to start stepping back from a little to get some clarity and some real ability to move forward myself. So I would also like to know more actually about any regional, it's, you know, how effective is it SEFTA in South Florida? That's what is that? The
SEPTEC, right?
SEPTA.
Right.
And
Southeast Florida Transportation Technical Council.
I would really
but
like
that's
to.
only
Okay.
3 MPOs,
It's
right?
3 MPOs that are all one urbanized area.
Right.
And it's important to note that Pasco, Pinellas, and Hillsborough are one federally designated urbanized area. So Beth talked about earlier that our urbanized areas are merging together. So there is Citrus Hernando coming into Pasco, Polk, and Hillsborough. And certainly, from my experience working in Manatee County, I know there's 35 to 40,000 dwelling units north of Port Manatee that are going to have a huge effect on both of our counties. So Manatee is kind of moving into our area. So, but we have one federally designated urbanized area for Pinellas, Hillsborough, and Pasco. And a lot of our federal funds are to the TMA, to the urbanized area. And then it's apportioned either based on population or by agreement. So when we talk about what's federal, that is the federal designation. And that's why we have a TMA leadership group. So I really would recommend that we not abandon the TMA leadership group, but as we're suggesting at a staff level, certainly through the adoption of our 3 long-range plans this year, I think it behooves us to meet regularly and ensure a good level of coordination. When that's done, we then move into coordinating with our partners in 2020 with Hillsborough, or with Polk and Sarasota Manatee, who will be adopting their long-range plans. And then I think that framework of the 8-county, we can call it a mini super region, because now we're at a population level that looks at growth to 2045 that's about where the Dallas-Fort Worth area is today. So it's a stronger multi-county region. But I think you need both levels, because we are a federally designated urbanized area that's the 3 counties. So I think we need to keep that in the mix, but I'm happy to shift the focus of these planning efforts to a larger 8-county region that encompasses all of T-BARTA, that encompasses 2 DOT districts, at least 2 regional planning councils, right? I mean, this is a symptom of all of Florida, not unique to Tampa Bay, that we have a lot of bureaucratic organizations.
But with overlapping jurisdictions and no resources is what what I think. And even, I mean, you were just even T-BARTA has Manatee but not Sarasota, even though they're a merged MPO. I mean, it just is to me.
And Hernando but not Citrus.
Yes, it just it boggles the mind to these different jurisdictions and what they are, and then and again, T-BARTA is transit only, and you know, I was recently contacted about them dropping, or what I've heard, you know, not focusing on trails, but that's not their jurisdiction anymore, and that seems like a better fit for the MPO CCCs, for instance. I'm thinking with the region, but Commissioner Overman.
Being new to this board is really actually fascinating. And I'm hearing the reasons why CCC exists and TMA exists and T-BARTA exists, and recognizing all the regional coordination that we do need to do in order to achieve a funding. So, I mean, at the end of the day, the reason we have these overlaying organizations is to do the business of helping our citizens get around effectively, right? So that's our major goal. I have a couple of questions as it relates to that, because I'm not as familiar with the CCC as I am with our MPO situation. I did see the presentation by the consultant that discussed the pros and cons of merging the MPOs, and found that, in summary, that all of our MPOs are doing quite well. To merge them might not go as well because of the distance, because we have such a very large region to cover. And it was really only addressing, I think, the 3 MPOs. So with that in mind, I have a couple of questions just to make sure I'm clear. The TMA is representing the 3 MPO areas, correct? And the CCC represents the 6 or 5?
6 MPOs, 8 counties.
Okay, and the CCC meets how many times?
In the last 5 years, it's been meeting twice a year.
Twice a year. And who sits on those boards now?
The chair of each of the MPOs.
Okay. And the TMA, we have the electeds from the MPOs represented.
And we have 3 members from each MPO.
3 members from each MPO. As well as other stakeholders in the process?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it is going to be important that our leadership still have great conversations about the way we can work together. I think there's real value in that. How we move forward to communicate that to each of our MPOs, I think, is maybe the question, is how do we decide that we're going to take a position to allow us to best qualify for that regional approach. And apparently that was what was discussed at the last meeting, is how do we do that. The CCC has a 1 vote per entity, and we don't have some clarity about what we're going to do with that, I assume, at the TMA level. But at the end of the day, I think we're doing good work, and you're right, we have way too many layers for anybody to figure out how to fit this. But I do think there's some value in making sure that the TMA takes a leadership in the planning and recommendations for achieving a regional funding mechanism when we are looking for federal and state dollars. I don't know what that looks like, because I'm still trying to get my feet planted in this group, but that would be a very important thing to work through, because if we're missing out on an opportunity to invest resources that are critically needed in an area that has been underfunded, either both in transit as well as regional coordination assets, you know, that should be our top priority. And so if there's a way to structure the TMA to be able to accomplish that goal, that may need to be how we structure our meetings going forward. That's what the way I've tried to figure out anything I've ever worked on, is how do we structure ourselves so that we can get that done in a way that if we take it back to our respective bodies to achieve and apply for every single thing we need. Because that seems to be the missing piece that we've had over the years. So.
I just think it might be helpful. You made some clarifications at the end of your presentation with regards do suggestions there. So maybe just to repeat those.
Sure, and so the suggestion was to go back to quarterly meetings of the MPO Chairs Coordinating Committee. There were quarterly meetings from the late 1990s up until 2014, I think. So the suggestion would be go back to quarterly meetings of the MPO chairs of that larger area next calendar year, and expand our regional element of our long-range transportation plans to include that entire 8-county area. Hearing the discussion about the TMA leadership group members wanting to continue to talk with each other and work together to get funding to champion important projects, it occurs to me that we could arrange the calendar the way we did for the summer meeting of the CCC, where we meet as the CCC for an hour, hour and a half, and then we get together with all of the MPOs along the I-4 corridor, all across to Orlando and the east side of the Florida Peninsula, and we have a much larger discussion about that super region and transportation movements in the super region. If we need to have supplemental meetings, we could convene the TMA leadership group for an hour and a half before the CCC gets together, focus and have dialogue on what's important to our Tri-County core, and then go into the decision-making process of the larger CCC region.
Beth, I think you raise a really good point. I'd just like to add to that the TMA leadership group is operating basically on a paragraph of aspirations of what we want to do. But maybe since we have the interlocal agreement established for the Chairs Coordinating Committee, that the TMA leadership group could be strengthened a little bit by being a named subcommittee of the Chairs Coordinating Committee and incorporated into some kind of interlocal agreement where that routine coordination would continue, but in a more formalized manner as a subcommittee of the CCC. Just something to think about.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Ryan.
Looking at the CCC, I tell you, it's a great job you did in the map, kind of showing the different reasons. It gives the CCC a little bit more relevance as far as why they're in existence in a sense. When you look at the separation between Hillsborough Manatee and Hernando Citrus, and it blends real well with Polk, but I think the TMA area is probably the most critical for the core of this whole region. And I think it should be not a subsection of the CCC, but it should be the lead organization, number one, because what goes on here is going to help everything radiate out. I think it's, as far as timing goes with having meetings, I mean, if I could say, I didn't make the last meeting just because there was an election that was going on, that those of you who may not have been close elections or scared of elections, then fine to come. But I'll tell you, whether it be my election, my daughter's election coming, when there's an election that's going on, to have it like 7 days before a meeting, yeah. I think you're really hurting it. Your tens of potential. So between city elections that are going to be coming up and, state elections or local elections, I think you need to be a little more sensitive to that to make sure you're going to get your attendance. So going through as far as like talking about, why is the region underfunded? My big thing is, if you look back 10 years ago, we had a whole bunch of money coming in here for a rail that was going to run from Tampa to Orlando. For different reasons that got squashed, that was a whole bunch of funding. We could have had money even 10 years before that. That went up to, I believe it was to Orlando or Charlotte. So, I mean, we've had opportunities. We just haven't been able to come together as a group. I think the 3 counties together need to really focus, stay together, and come up with the projects. And I will say, I think the BRT was a great compromise position to what potentially there was a lot of other things out there and still are, but at least that was a good first step to go after. So us coming together is going to be critical, and I think we should not take backseat to between T-BAR to the CCCs, even our MPOs. If we're going to try to get federal money, the 9 of us need to be at the table together talking about this and putting projects through that can go out there. And when it comes time to go to D.C., we should be united in going up there together, speaking with that one voice.
So, Commissioner?
Yes.
I would just like to say hooray for Commissioner Mariano, because for those of us that have been to DC lobbying and talking with the federal transit folks, the one thing that they have focused on hard is the fact that that was the first time when several of us were there, that this region had spoken with one voice and one message. And because of that, we got further into the pipeline for transportation funding than we've ever been before for our BRT project. And I look forward, once the government really gets back up and running smoothly, for those funds to be released. Right, Brad? So,
Commissioners. Commissioner Starkey.
And I agree 100% with Commissioner Mariano. And I recall when I met with Senate Transportation Committee last year, they're just waiting for us. I mean, they are waiting for us to come up with a plan. We're due. I think they all know that. And we need to stick together. We need to speak with one voice. And I think we should focus on this 3-county region now because this is where the most congestion is, and this is where I think we have the greatest opportunity to be successful for federal funds.
amen.
Go ahead. Commissioner.
Good morning, everyone.
Your mic.
Good morning, everyone. My apologies for being a few minutes late this morning. This is, I think, my first real TMA meeting. I may have attended one a couple of years ago in which we had started off with a short list of priorities, and by the time I left, that list of priorities went to, I think, about 10 different items. And then now I'm back again 2 years later. I would like to thank Commissioner Overman, who's new to this group also, because I was having some of the same questions, trying to understand how the CCC fits into this as a model. And I also just totally agree with the last few comments that were made, starting with Commissioner Mariano. It seems to me in the presentation there was a reference made to a pink unicorn. I would say let's make it a hedgehog in the Jim Collins spirit. And that means let's look at that nexus of knowing exactly what we want, knowing exactly what our assets are and what drives our economic engine. And let's look at what we're best at and just really focus on that. And it makes sense to me to continue to keep our focus with the 3 counties here as part of our TMA, where a lot of that focus that's most important or has some of the biggest impact, I should say, I think that's what's really driving things. So, thank you.
Commissioner Eggers.
I'm glad I let you go first because that was kind of some of the thoughts that I had and probably said better than I would say it. We have talked about urbanized area and the 3 counties being a big part of that. And I do think it plays a key role in this greater CCC discussion. I liked your idea about I don't want to lose sight of the 3 county because I do think that is the hub. But I think the conversation is the greater conversation, maybe an increasing role in the CCC for the region. But even the conversation that you were talking about stretching over to Orlando, to have some of those conversations at again different levels, but not losing sight of what our responsibilities are to have that one voice for the area. To bring funds back here. So I think there's a lot of different moving parts that can all work. They don't have to be mutually exclusive, but I do think this, I agree with Commissioner Mariano, I agree with a few of the comments that were made that we do need to continue speaking strongly as one 3-county area. For state funding, I mean, and again, I'd like to understand a little bit more how the funding for the state, when you talk about District 7, District 1, and now we have a CCC that includes 2 districts, and I want to make sure that, again, that we're doing what we can to get the money here for our district, for our residents primarily. So anyway, I think they can all exist, but I think the focus has to be this hub right here. So just a thought.
Did you have any comments, Secretary?
Yeah, just what we're really talking about is the strategic intermodal system dollars, because the rest of the money is more or less by type of project, safety, other things, or by population given out to the MPOs. But the strategic intermodal system money, which is 50% of our money, is all allocated at the state level. And it's based on more or less regional connectivity, freight movement. How can we better connect all the areas of the state, including ports, airports, and other things. So that's really what we compete for. We go up to Tallahassee, we present what we want to do, and at some point up there, they have to determine of the maybe $10 billion worth of requests, and they have in the next $5 billion, how does that get determined? And so it is true that we did lose some money because of the reset, and we're trying to get some of that back now, but it is much stronger, and I think the region has done a good job recently of coming around the West Shore interchange to say that's important to all of us, and we want to, and it's getting, I think, a good reception. So yeah, that's always real important, but it is that strategic intermodal system money. That's what we're trying to get here.
When you say we, you're talking District 7.
Well,
you're talking this region. What do you?
Yeah, well, for me specifically as District 7, but I also coordinate with the adjacent districts. I mean, there's some projects like I-4 maybe coming through Polk County that obviously has an impact on us as well. 75 coming through Manatee, or so we do coordinate, but yeah, we advocate for District 7 first and try to make our projects raise to the top of the list.
Maybe it's implied, but I just think it needs to be said, is invariably when we're at our local jurisdictions, we're kind of competing with each other. We want to make sure that we get a business that you don't get. But when we're in a regional, we're not like Colorado where Denver gets everything or Utah gets everything, so they compete with each other as states. We're like California or Florida where we compete with our other cities. So really, to some degree, we're competing with Miami and Orlando, and we want to find ways that we're stronger and that we develop more interest. And they've done the regionalization, and that's probably why some of those cities get more money than we do, because we have to collectively say sometimes it's all about our region. And we are competing with other areas of the state. And so that's something that I think it's implied, but it has to be said because we have to balance what we want locally with what benefits all of us regionally and then ultimately locally. So it's a hard thing for people to adjust to. But I think it's imperative if you want to move the next step and win those awards that, the FDOT works for. And the legislature always says, find your local money before you come to us. That's always something that they'll tell us. And they also say, if you come to us as a group, we're more receptive than when you come to us individually. And I think we know that, but we seem to have a lot of trouble getting over the hurdle to actually do it. And I think this is a chance to do it because we used the Tabarda model. It worked for a while. Now we have to find another model,
well,
and a better one.
I would just say that I think Secretary Gwynn made an important distinction because we seem to just put all these types of funding, awards, and everything together. I think it's very distinct, the funding that you get for roads or the SIS, as opposed to the funding that you get for transit, which in terms of, as you said, the SIS, it can make a difference. In terms of awards for transit projects, it doesn't. As you said, clearly, it's based on the type of project that you submit and how that project's looked at, and the federal government is looking at when they're funding the strength of your project and your MPO population, your within your local area. That's how those awards are made. We have had awards made here, significant awards, or could have, both times in Hillsborough County. Our high-speed rail that was killed by the governor. At the time, we would have had it already. We had another possibility at a rail project back in the 90s or early 2000s that our Hillsborough County Commission wasn't willing to support locally. Since then, there's been a paucity of any projects, zero submitted in terms of transit for funding. The first project that's been submitted is the BRT in St. Petersburg. That's it. But you have to have willing to have local dollars on the table for transit projects. So I think we're talking about two different worlds here. And, you know, there's not the, again, the regional parking garage plan, as I call it, because I don't believe it is not a transit project. But, you know, I don't see the will in Hillsborough County for being part of funding that for capital or operations. To me, it should be, if there's operations to be funded between counties, it should be funded by the state, as they do now in Miami, and as they should be doing, and as we do somewhat here, but I would like to see more robust. And if I saw something that this group could work towards, it would be getting more robust transit funding between counties that the state has not been willing to do, because I think that should be on their dollar to do that. But I just wanted some, you know, I think now in Hillsborough, we're going to be moving forward with transit projects. We have our local funds to do that, and I see that happening when this lawsuit is resolved. But I just wanted to make it clear in terms of projects. We're talking about two different worlds here when we're talking about the CIS and our unity in that, or when we're talking about transit, which is a different universe in how you get awarded money. I don't think your regionalization, you know, is a important part of you're getting funding for transit projects.
If I could just respond to that, I think you're correct in that regard, but you know, we are one urbanized area for the 3 counties, and the Federal Transit Administration, in looking at funding transit projects, does like to look at how they're working regionally. And you want all the voices in the region supporting your project, just like the Hillsborough MPO has supported the Central Avenue Bus Rapid Transit Project through this TMA leadership group. I think having that was helpful, and I think PASCO also came to support that project. So I think you're stronger when you're working together and you're perceived as good partners. And we in Pinellas are having very serious conversations about how we can fund transit projects with local dollars. And you're right, you need those local matches together. But if Hillsborough is going to start advancing a transit project, we want to see ourselves in how we can connect to that with our local dollars when we're ready. And I think PASCO wants to see the same thing, whether it's CSX or the Bus Rapid Transit or some other kind of project. So this is, it's not a question of whether we work together regionally. It's a question of how strongly we work together. And so I think anything that can strengthen that relationship is a good thing, is a positive thing. And we're going to need to advocate in Washington and at the state level for any project, whether it's in Hillsborough to start and then it builds out from there, or whether it's the Central Avenue BRT and it builds out from there. I think those are all things that we can work together.
Or both.
Yeah, could be both. We'd love to have 5 lined up and ready to go.
Right, and I think we can get there, honestly.
Yes.
And, you know, I want to commend Hillsborough for passing that transportation tax. It was a phenomenal achievement. It's something I think everybody in the room, in the region, was hoping it was going to pass, because we needed to have, you know, you're the core as far as where the rail lines go, where the ports are, the airports are. So with your growth in getting that done, it leads to opportunities where all these connections can be made. But I want to just kind of touch on, are we clear that we all support the BRT and we're all unified in that?
I think this board all voted for it. I'm certainly
Okay.
Not in the regional, if you're referring to the regional, what I refer to as the parking garage plan, no, we didn't, I don't think, did that at this board. But if the Central the Central Avenue BRT, I think is an awesome project, and I think got the support of this board. Isn't that accurate? The BRT in St. Petersburg has the full support, but not the regional.
That has been a priority of the TMA leadership group, and we've also included it in the Hillsborough priorities.
Mm-hmm. But not this. If you're asking about what is being called
from Wesley Chapel running
right,
through Tampa.
this board has not supported that.
When you say this board, are you referring to TMA?
Yeah,
or
I'm talking about the TMA.
Well,
I don't think
know.
we.
Let's vote.
Well,
to vote.
maybe You're recognized, Commissioner Overman.
Okay. I've actually listened to a lot of the conversations regarding the regional transit express service. That is important to our process. Hillsborough specifically, from much of the conversations that I've had, those that live in the urban core that would be more impacted than not by the development in order to support the regional bus system has voiced serious concerns about the project because there's not a full understanding of what the transit connections would be, how that connects with HART, how it connects with the neighborhoods. We have like 5 studies all in the middle of the works right now. It's delayed projects that were moving forward but suddenly had to stop because of or slow down in order to create the coordination. So not to say that Hillsborough won't come around with the idea of a regional transit solution. I personally am more committed to actually utilizing the right-of-way for our CSX lines for creating a regional solution. It makes more sense to me. And we didn't have the matching dollars to even have that conversation prior to November and whenever we get the issue resolved with the status of those dollars. But to that being said, I think the hesitation we're finding on the Hillsborough side is the local impact it will have on an area that is just now recovering from the destruction of 275 coming through it in the middle of the 60s. So there's a huge pushback in that center core without having more clarity about how the project is going to work. So I just wanted to share that with this board, not to say we're not looking for a regional solution, because clearly we want to cooperate in that respect. But from my perspective, from what I've witnessed, both at watching this board as well as listening to the communities and the MPO meetings, there's hesitation until there's more clarity.
As a chair, excuse me, as a chair, I'm just going to say we're getting off the topic here, which was the approaches to regional coordination. We're really not talking about the specific systems. I think we should save that for another time. We've had that discussion before. It's not on the agenda today. So I think we really need to, I don't know if there's anyone else that wants to speak about approaches to regional coordination and, if there is.
If I
Secretary
could
Gwen.
just, and I think most of you know Ming, who's our modal manager, and I rely on him a lot. I think he wanted to maybe clarify a couple of things that were said relates to the state's funding. Ming, could you do that?
Absolutely. Good morning.
Morning.
Just want to share with this group that as far as transit funding, they are a statewide pods, just like the SIS funding, because we do have a statewide New Starts program, and we use that, to match local fund as well as the FTA funds. So, we place $10 million on the Central Avenue project, and we also program $100 million on one of the SMART plan down in Miami. It's all because we look at, regional impact. And some of the program, as well as the transit corridor, which we're currently funding the 100X and the 300X, between the 2 counties. We also fund the 275LX because they're regional projects, so we continue to fund that. Those are state-managed transit funds. I just want to make sure to clarify that we do have state-managed funds, and they do get allocated, just like the SIS. They look at regional significance. Just want to bring it up.
Question, please.
Sure.
In that pot, don't you also look very carefully at the regional voice and cooperation?
Absolutely. I mean, the Central Avenue project, we brought it up. That is the overall part of the overall vision for this region, and we have no issue getting the funding. Of course, we are competing with Miami. They have 5 corridors. Miami-Dade, that's a huge area. So in order to compete with Miami-Dade, we need to ask for the funding as a region. That's a bigger voice for us.
I'd just like to say I think it would be a valuable thing that in the 2 years I've been here and on other boards, I don't think I've ever gotten at least a presentation I can remember mostly. I've studied on my own, but to get a kind of primer on how the transit in particular funding works. So I think that might be a good thing for this board in the future, or some of the other boards that we're on, the transportation boards.
Yeah, I just want to, thanks. I just want to reiterate or emphasize what some of the other folks have said, that there are a lot of layers and different groups, but the coordination among these 3 counties, I think, is really important. And so it's valuable to have the TMA leadership group for Pasco, Pinellas, and Hillsborough. Even it just gets a little diluted, I think, with the Chairs Coordinating Council. So whatever we need to do to keep this group going, I think it's really important for the reasons that everybody else is saying, is that it's good for us to be advocating for each other. Like the Central Avenue BRT, I think this list of 5 priorities is really good. I remember that meeting, Darden, where they had the 5 priorities that expanded to about 12 or 15, and it's really nice to see it back to 3 focused ones that we can all focus on and advocate for each other.
Are there any?
I don't want to bring up I think your suggestion at a later time, but I do want to say that that's exactly the type of thing that once you see an action of something like that study, that's exactly what the legislature wants to see. I mean, we can talk about we're going to do these plans, but once you actually see it physically done, there's value to that, whether it works for all of us or not. So I'm just saying we can't overlook the value of anything we do, because there's
Thank you. Commissioner Starkey?
I just want to respond to Commissioner Overman. So, what we're doing here is trying to speak with a regional voice. You have many of your employees in Hillsborough County living in my county. I know there are a lot of teachers and a lot of first responders who live in Pasco because they can't afford to live in Hillsborough. So I think it's really important that we keep this regional perspective, understanding that we all have local issues. And I am 100% behind helping Hillsborough County find that last mile solution for when people come into downtown, how they get around. I think one of those solutions is the airport to West Shore project that I know Pasco County will support 100% to help get funding for that. So, we all get it, I think, here, and I think you're hearing, we all feel having a regional voice is going to move us so much further ahead. And Pasco County supported that Central Boulevard, which will help people who come here from other countries be able to get from downtown to the beaches. That benefits everybody. So I hope that Hillsborough County will get on board with this regional plan.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Mariano.
And Commissioner Overman, as you said about as far as the CSX line, I will tell you, Commissioner Kemp and I, we looked at this stuff real hard. We were looking at numbers every step of the way and real critical to make sure we're going to make the right decision through it. And that line running from Brooksville all the way down to Channelside, the other one running from near USF, near Mosey, going all the way across down to St. Pete, those were the 2 big opportunities I saw right away. With the legislative power we have right now, the reason I think the business community reached out to a lot of us that were sitting on it for a couple of years, that was the one project we can get done quickly, get funded together, and make a difference. And again, I salute you guys for getting your referendum passed, because if that goes through, it's the start of many more things. And I think that north-south line running all the way from Hernando right on down is going to be huge, and I think it runs right across, connecting to Pinellas County on the other side. There's a whole key that can connect, which is huge, but you got to start with something you can get. And right now, with the power we have, with the place it can go, if you do have hesitation, I will tell you, if we're going to go compete against Miami-Dade, they're all together. We're going to go keep Orlando. If you guys are going to go fight about whether we really want to see it or not, and we don't have one voice, we're doomed.
Commissioner Mariana, we're moving away again from talking. We can't seem to keep to approaches to regional coordination. We're talking again about an individual project, which has already been on this agenda for many times. And, I just think we need to stick to this instead of the talking about the project. And I feel probably myself that part of the reason we keep getting into this is because they're really I think has been a positive explanation about that project and a basis for that project, because I would disagree in about 10 different ways with the statements that were made. But we shouldn't be talking, I don't, at this point. It's not on the agenda. It wasn't part of the discussion. This is simply about
comments are to
approaches
the
to regional.
regional. Yes, it
Thank
is.
you.
In all due respect, though, Commissioner, you said that we didn't support it because we've never had a vote. So I don't know what the Robert's Rules of Order is, but at some point today, I would like to take a vote.
Well, it's not on the agenda. It's not for a vote. It isn't for discussion here.
So then would we have to ask for a vote of allowing it to be a topic that we can vote on? What are Robert's
Maybe
rules?
address that?
Yes, thank
so
you.
At our April meeting, we will be asking you all to recommend priorities. That project is not on the priority list simply because it's beginning the PD&E design phase that TBARTA will be managing, and that'll take place over about, what, the next 18 months, 2 years, basically? And we won't really know what the project is for a couple of years, but what I would recommend is at the April meeting is we have the priorities that we presented earlier today. As part of recommending approval of those priorities, if you desire, we could put an item on there saying, in concept, we support the idea of this connection conceptually, but it's not a project. So we're keeping it off the priority list, and I don't think it's appropriate for us to vote really right now on supporting that project because we don't know what the project is. It's still a concept.
Okay, so in April, maybe we can take some action.
Yeah.
So may I make my point, please?
Commissioner Long.
Thank you. I just wanted to reference what you said, Commissioner Oberman, in terms of the feasibility plan that we've all been talking about, which does have a very specific regional connection. It isn't a specific project yet because, as has been mentioned,
Commissioner Long.
it's not all flushed out. It's not all flushed out. And it clearly is not a parking lot. For those of us that really have a passion for public transportation and have been working on it for decades, it's a beginning. And we're further along because of it than we've ever been before. So the concerns of the local folks and some of our current people who are always opposing it, we don't know yet what the final picture is going to look like, but it's a beginning. And yes, there are a lot of things that need to be worked on and flushed out, and I'm confident that they will be over time. But we have to keep talking about them in order to get there. My point. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Just to be clear, since we keep driving back there, literally driving back there, there are 9,000 parking spaces in this project with $430 million out of $455 million for parking garages, what are essentially parking garages. So I just want to be clear that that's the basis of the project. But I think we should stop talking about this and go back to approaches to regional coordination and stop discussing this.
So if I could jump in at some point and maybe wrap up some of the regional
Yes, thank you.
coordination
That might be
discussion.
good.
So I'm hearing from quite a few people that you all would like to continue meeting as the TMA leadership group to continue to focus on urban core issues. And so I think that's great. I think it's great that we want to come together and collaborate more. I'm going to beg your patience with me. I'm asking for your help with red tape. So we have a lot of bureaucracy that goes into these meetings, including all the regional meetings. Hillsborough MPO is going to have some formal coordination mechanism with Polk and with Sarasota Manatee, and Pasco is going to have some kind of formal coordination mechanism with Hernando Citrus. So what I'm asking for your help with is, can we not have 2 layers of interlocal agreements and bylaws and decision-making processes? Would you be willing, if we could create a way for the TMA leadership group to continue to meet and hash out what's important to the urban core, could we create that within the structure of the CCC that covers the coordination we're required to do?
may I just ask, would you like a motion of this group for you to move forward on this, or what would
We
you
only make
like?
decisions by consensus.
Mhm.
So we would just go around the table among the MPO board members and ask if there are any concerns about moving in that direction.
Okay, so who are members of the TMA right now? At this, who are voting members?
Janet, you are too.
Okay, so let's.
Robert Janet.
I support that.
I support that.
I do. Okay. So we have unanimous agreement.
Thank
okay,
you. That's
great.
wonderful. I
Thank you
appreciate it
so
so
much
much.
for your presentation, as painful as it may have been. I did think it was a very good discussion, actually. Mm-hmm. And finally, I guess we have.
She's been waiting to say
Yeah.
Has the TMA, have we had the opportunity to hear a presentation recently that really helps us get down to brass tacks, understanding the fundamentals of like the FDOT budget and seeing where money comes in, where money is going, why other projects are funded in the state and why? Because that's what individually I'd like to have a stronger grasp of. And I sense maybe as a whole, we would benefit as well.
Councilwoman Darden, I think that's a really great suggestion. I do think we could save any further ideas like that for future agenda items, maybe at the end of, after we get our update here.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. And we have now Regional Vulnerability Assessment. Allison Ye, Hillsborough MPO.
Good morning. I'm Allison Ye with the Hillsborough MPO, and I want to tell you about a regional project we've been working on from a grant we received from the Federal Highway Administration. It's called the Resilience and Durability to Extreme Weather Pilot Program. I have a two-pager in front of you. There's a lot of details, so this will help kind of for you later to refer to. This project is a regional project, so it's the 3 MPOs, and we have representatives here from the 3 MPOs and the DOT and the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, and we have a Cambridge Systematics on board to help us with this. It's been a really great regional cooperation. My partners we've been working very closely together, and this is a great resiliency project that goes along with our long-range transportation planning right now. So these are facts that are probably very familiar to you already. We have in Tampa Bay region roughly under 3 million in population, which is the second largest population in Florida. So all collectively about over 1,000 square miles of shoreline, with 58% of those people vulnerable in some way to flooding. In our recent analysis, this is a little fresher data, we looked at lane miles, and there's about almost 3,000 miles that are affected by a Category 3 storm with sea level rise added, and that's about 29% of the lane miles in the county. It's actually, if you break it down by county, it's a little bit higher. In Pinellas County, you're looking at maybe like 59%. So the goal was, we're doing our long-range transportation updates, and it's perfect timing to do this analysis and feed that into the long-range plans, and also coordinate at a region level with all the local mitigation groups who are doing emergency planning, who are doing post-disaster redevelopment planning. We know we're not the only effort out there, so we're also coordinating with the efforts in Hillsborough County and giving as much data as we can, and in Pinellas County and in Pasco County. A lot of those studies in Pinellas and Hillsborough are 3 years out, so we're kind of first out of the gate with some of this information, and we're trying to share as much as possible. We have legislative requirements to do this. We update our long-range plan every 5 years, but the FAST Act, the Transportation Act, says that we must consider improving resiliency and reliability. And along with that long-range planning, we're going to be doing environmental consultation on a broader level. And we've actually, just recently, the 3 MPOs have agreed to do this consultation together as a region. So I think that will help feed into our transportation plan, the regional transportation plan, and everyone else's individually. So for the purposes of the study, I know resiliency covers a lot of things, but we are focusing on flooding. So that would be inland flooding, storm surge, and sea level rise. As a broader community goal, we're not just trying to meet federal legislation. We're trying to make sure our system meets our needs, and it looks at the economic aspects and the quality of life. And we're actually getting a lot of help from our regional partners on this, especially the Regional Planning Council. This is our 10,000-foot timeline. We've already gone through 2 phases. So we've collected the data, looked at what linkages are critical, and right now we're looking at adaptation strategies, and we're really racing towards the long-range plan this summer. So we're feeding data in May and June into the long-range plans, and we'll have follow-up after that. But so it's moving pretty fast, which is why I said we're kind of first out of the gate with some of the studies and information. There's a lot going on, but I just wanted to make the point that we are doing quantitative analysis, but we are very aware that that can't be the only thing that you go on when you make these assumptions. So we're talking to stakeholders groups. We're talking to Public Works, looking at their persistent flooding locations. We're trying to leverage and look at what's in the long-range plans already and what's going on out there, and trying as hard as possible not to recreate anything that's been done already that's valid. This is a collected map. You actually have it on the back of your flyer here because it's a little hard to see on my screen. But we took sea level rise and category storm surge and took a look at, what might be vulnerable based on, it's 11 factors here that are based on what people use in the industry and what professionals have told us. So we weighted them and came up with a low, medium, high criticality rating to help us do the analysis. So low would mean something like under the number 10, 10 and under, and high would be 13 and above. And they're color-coded red, orange, sort of orange and green. So this is a way for us to look at regional and wide what's going on, and then we're going to do a regional assessment, both for the vulnerability and also for do an econometric analysis. Regional Planning Council is helping us do that. And on top of that, we know that a regional-wide analysis is sometimes kind of daunting and may not get down to the level of what our adaptation measures we need to do. So each county has picked 2 representative projects. They are listed also here for you. This is color-coded on my map, but they're numbered on this map for you. So in Hillsborough County, we're looking at a segment from Big Bend, US 41 to 75, and we're looking at Gandy Boulevard, even though that crosses both counties. And right now we're looking at both directions, even though the eastbound direction is the one we focus on because that's the evacuation route. Gulf Boulevard to 125th Street and Stewart Causeway Boulevard in Pinellas, that's one of the projects, and then Roosevelt Boulevard from Almerton to Gandy. In Pinellas County, there's State Route 54 from US 19 to Suncoast Parkway, and then US 19 from 54 to 52. So if you look at on the map, it's a good mix of projects that look at inland flooding and looks at coastal flooding and the regional as well with the Gandy Bridge crossing. So that's going to receive, I should mention, I talked about sea level rise and storm surge. We recognize that precipitation is also something that's important. So we're finalizing our precipitation data right now. What we're looking at is 2 types of scenarios. So from historical data, we're looking at a scenario of 1 day, 9 inches of rain coming down, and what would happen with that. And then the other scenario we're looking at is something like Hurricane Harvey, where you have 3 continuous days of rain, maybe 11 inches at a time. And we're working with our experts to the Regional Planning Council who have done a lot of this modeling in the past. So that will be coming in the future with more data. So with all this information, we are going to look at adaptation strategies. So Federal Highway is emphasizing not just gray infrastructure changes, but gray and green. So we're looking at that along with typical water management strategies. And we're coordinating with the DOT and coordinating with Public Works and trying to vet this information and not just, do this in a vacuum as a desk review. Our next steps, we are doing our econometric or economic analysis right now. So probably in the next 2 briefings, I'll be able to share that with you. We're going through a second round of stakeholder engagement. We're going to all the local mitigation strategy groups again. And I really like these groups in particular. There's one in each county because they prioritize funding for post-disaster, and they also are composed of the public, the private sector, government officials. So it's a really nice mixture of people. We're talking to the transportation disadvantaged groups, and we're tapping into Regional Planning Council's One Bay Livable Communities Working Group, which is also a very diverse group. And we're going to be talking to MPO committees or MPOs as the schedule permits and as we're requested to. Finally, we're developing an adaptation toolbox that we'll be sharing. And then hopefully, if everything goes well, we'll incorporate this into the LRTP, and if everything goes really well, we'll incorporate this into the local mitigation strategy plans as well. And they're all being updated right now. This is my contact information. We have a website with information on it. There's a lot more, quantitative data, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And I also have my colleagues from Pasco and Ford Pinellas here.
Thank you for
Yeah.
that presentation.
Yeah.
Are there questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Commissioner Long.
I don't have a question as much as
Okay.
I have a comment that I would like to make, because Allison's point that she has been making in her presentation is all about why the Regional Planning Council last year worked on the sea level rise and climate resiliency compact, which all of us here signed on to as governmental entities. And to that point, this year, we're working very hard to bring the quasi-governmental agencies, i.e. that would be this group, the MPOs, planning councils, and the business community to the table, because last year as we worked to put this compact together, those are the groups that were not at the table, where our focus was on governments, because you probably remember from Irma, the issues that we had after Hurricane Irma, and clearly we recognize that the state of Florida does not have a resiliency plan for disaster and mitigation afterwards. And so through the compact, it was presented at the Florida Association of Counties, which I know, Commissioner Kemp, I've seen you there, and Commissioner Mariano and Commissioner Starkey are always great attendees at it as well. It passed at the policy conference and the legislative conference, and the number one priority was to ask the state of Florida to create a statewide resiliency plan, because right now they don't have one. So that's going to be important, and for our issues that we talk about with regard to regional transportation solutions, this is a real public health and safety issue if we cannot evacuate or move our citizens from one county to the other in the event of a storm. So just think about that as we're having our discussions. Thank you.
Commissioner Overman?
Thank you. Just as a point of order, all through today, I'd love to get copies of all the slide materials to refer to. It helps me remember what the things we talked about, and I'm a visual person, so it's this aging brain's got a lot in it right now. So, but to your point, I've sat through several presentations recognizing the valuable information of the work that you're doing, and I want to thank you for doing it, because you're doing a great job. It is critically important. A lot of our vulnerable areas, as you see from the map and the handout, are going to be in real dire straits if we don't have a plan for it. When you see how much of our urban cores will be, literally underwater. And as we move forward, I think it's very important for us to pay attention to in your reference to your comments, Ms. Long. It is critically important that we speak with one voice for addressing the issues that we can all agree on are safety. Living in Florida, I used to live as a child in hurricane territory in Louisiana. And there, you just left. You just went somewhere else. Here, this one half of the state moves to the other half of the state, and by the time, we figure out we need to move, the rest of the other half of the state's here, and there's nowhere for us to go. So, addressing these issues are critically important to the safety of our citizens, and that takes a paramount of importance for making sure that we address in these issues in our long-range transportation plan. So thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you so much. I really want to emphasize that we've had such a great time. We're leading the grant, but could not do it without Ford Pinellas and Pasco County, and especially DOT, who's been so open to giving us feedback on the projects, and the Regional Planning Council, we're tapping into their expertise for all the analysis and modeling. So just want to say it's been a really great regional working experience. Yeah.
Thank you. Is there Councilwoman Rice?
Thank you. And I just wanted to add on to, thank you for your presentation and all your work. Thank you for your leadership, Commissioner Long. It's helpful also to look at the example of what happened in the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy when it landed in New Jersey. It was a hurricane actually that I think downgraded to a tropical storm before reaching land, and even so did at least well over $50 billion in damage. And some of that, of course, was damage to homes and businesses, but a lot of that economic impact was the way that roads and bridges were either washed out or rendered unsafe. And that really goes to the heart of resiliency and how quickly we get back on our feet, get people back to work. And our transportation network is a big part of that. So thank you. We want to learn from their lessons. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Commissioner Merritt.
Thank you. When I look at the map, it's kind of scary looking at all the blue on the along the coastal area. And when I think about everyone from Pinellas and South Hillsborough all the way down to McDill trying to get out and where they go. We have the road 54 going across, and during Tropical Storm Debbie, that thing flooded out. And the only road going across is all the way up to State Road 52, which is still a few years before that's fully done. If you hear about Ridge Road Extension, that'll be one you want to get behind, because that is a road we've got elevated going through. That'll help you guys get out when you get stuck. But in looking at the map, I'm looking at your red lines, and I appreciate working, especially on the coast. I mean, we deal with coastal development issues in West Pasco, making sure we want to get seawalls up, which, by the way, we got that ordinance coming through together, so thank you.
Good. Thank you.
So the productivity of protecting everybody that's coming in now is very important. But when I look at your red lines out on 75 way out in part of 301, I don't see any storm surge there. Some of those roads are up real high, so I'm wondering, are you spending a lot of time and energy out to the east, or is it really going to be more on the coast?
Well, there's a regional-wide analysis and talk about if the system is disrupted. So the ones you see red here will be wrapped up into the economic analysis. If you look at the representative projects, they kind of tell a little, I'm sorry, it's not on here, it's numbered for you from 1 to 6. We're not, I guess one thing to keep in mind is what you're seeing here is Category 3 and sea level rise. Another big part that Federal Highway wanted to emphasize is, we kind of live on a sponge in Florida, and is the repetitive flood areas. There's areas that flood constantly, and it's, sometimes the expressways are elevated, but the approaches to the expressway might not be. So what you're not seeing is the 9-inch rain data and the 33-inch rain data. That would have gone into elevating its status. And these 11 factors on the back of the spreadsheet, that's how it got up to it. So sometimes it's receiving a heavier weighting because it might already be in a long-range transportation plan and looked at for that reason, or it has a vulnerable population next to it. So all these factors kind of, organized them, shook out what became red and what became, medium, low, and high. So we're not necessarily focusing our time on that, if that's what I guess you're.
Well, I just want to make, I mean, it says it's critical, so maybe I just want to make sure I'm interpreting it right. If it's
So,
critical,
yeah.
means we can need to have it to get people out, but it's not critical as far as being worried about going underwater.
No, that's one aspect of it. It's critical because it's in a vulnerable area to natural stressors like flooding, and, well, in this case, it would be probably more flooding in general, not, coastal storm surge and sea level rise.
All right.
So I probably have to show you the spreadsheet to see why that one came out red specifically, but there's about 13 factors that go into why we consider something critical. So if it's a high flood area, there's a vulnerable population there, it's part of long-range transportation process, so that
Okay.
will probably elevate it. And we're not just focusing on that. If we were to do just a coastal analysis, that probably wouldn't be red. That was the only criteria we're looking at.
Are there any other comments, questions? I just like to say I'm very pleased that you're looking at this. It was a very good presentation. When I see particularly this Category 3, it's important to note, it's a Category 3 storm surge with the NOAA high sea level rise projection for 2045, which many people even think the NOAA high level, it may not be high enough. And we're certainly seeing it, changes in the data month by month. I think scientists are looking at more and discovering more. So this is just when I look at this map in particular, I think it is frightening. It is very frightening and puts a big charge on us for what we possibly can do. And so I appreciate the information and the attention. So I think that is the last item on our agenda. We're now to next steps and future agenda items, and I think Councilwoman Rice named a great item for the future. Do we get that?
Workshop on regional funding.
Workshop on regional funding. I think your mic needs to be on. Mm-hmm.
Specifically, as part of that, or a key part of that, is really understanding the FDOT budget.
And I don't know if it needs to be separate, but what I would also like to have, and it probably is a separate topic, but kind of a real drill down on how transit funding occurs and happens. Commissioner Eggers?
I'm glad you said that, because that's where I was going to go. I mean, we have our partners at TBARTA and playing a critical role in that arena, and we have a different role. I mean, in Pinellas County, we're putting a plan. Our LRTP includes our land use planning, but also wraps in our transit piece with it. So we're kind of working together. So I think it'd continue to be important that we have that partner's thoughts and input as how we work, and we kind of mesh together. So I think that would be a good potential presentation. A lot of you are on TBARTA, some of us aren't. And so it'd be nice to see how that plugs in and how we separate and how we are together. So.
Commissioner Starkey?
I know it's difficult for us to get to it, but I do believe DOT puts on an event where we can learn some of this. Can you speak to that, Secretary? It's a 2-day class somewhere.
We probably have had those in the past. I'm not sure if we have them regularly scheduled. Do you know me? I don't, but we can certainly put something together that would be a good primer for how all our funding works.
Excuse me. I don't, if we could.
I'm sorry.
No, not you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There's just so much.
No, what I was saying is I'm not sure about there may be, and I just don't know about a regularly scheduled type of a thing, but we do have primers that we can go ahead and pull together so that we can provide that, right?
Maybe she means the Cutter, the 2-day thing you guys usually do in June.
Oh, so what is that all about?
It's the MPO Institute.
Right. It's typically for new MPO members, but
Okay, so
I believe Councilmember Rice has been twice. So.
Okay. All right, so that isn't working then.
So,
No, I think you learn a lot more the second time, maybe.
Yes, that's what you meant to say.
That's coming up in May in Tampa. So there is an open, we can certainly pass out send by email the opportunity for folks to register for that if you'd like to do that.
Yeah. I also think I went to that, and I don't think there was a specifics like that you're referring to in terms of transit funding and FDOT funding. I think it's more kind of like the governance and jurisdiction and things like that. I would recommend everybody go to it. I think I learned an immense amount, but I don't think the topics that you're asking about are there. And I also think that they would be good to have on each of our committees. And I don't think you could talk enough about that and a drill down to a shorter type of, and stronger presentation and a shorter time that addresses each of those issues, I think would be very, very helpful.
Exactly. I think the goal of the presentation would be to have a really strong sense of what transit projects get funded and why. Not necessarily to have a long presentation on the history of MPOs and federal funding, right, which we can get at the MPO AC, which is why you may want to go twice. But no, just useful information so that we have a strong grasp of what it takes regionally to get our projects funded. Thank you.
Point well taken, I think. Is there anyone else with any future items that they'd like to see?
Just to add
Commissioner
on-
Marion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, just adding the same thing. I think maybe taking a look at how Charlotte, Los Angeles, Miami-Dade, Orlando, how they all got together too, to kind of have that one voice to show how the projects did get funded because of that collaboration.
So I think we're going to get into a discussion here again.
I'm
That
just talking about
drifted a
date.
little from the, but Commissioner Starkey.
I was looking at the calendar, and I was just checking on the May meeting, if we're here this month, and next month we're in Pinellas. Are we in Pasco County in May? And do we need to help set that up?
Yes, that's the.
Okay, so that would be the first Friday in May? Because I don't.
Maybe this could be coordinated after the meeting since it's already scheduled and.
Because I didn't see anything
right.
here.
Is there, are
a
there?
date or anything. so I wasn't sure.
Okay. Next meeting, it's got, well.
We're in Pinellas County.
Okay, I see, Friday, April 5th. Okay, so maybe that can be dealt with later. Are there any other future agenda items to take up? Commissioner Overman.
And this is, I think this was what was the idea of today's agenda regarding approaches on regional coordination, but I actually happened to read the notes for last meeting. And there was much discussion on option A, B, and C regarding voting on how we actually made decisions or made recommendations or came together as an organization for getting behind one project or another, or a strategy, or any of the above. And I'm not sure we got that addressed today. And given that it's so critically important that we do have the need at some point in time to have a unified voice, I'd like to suggest that we do revisit that conversation. Apparently we weren't able to at the last meeting because there were not enough folks at the table. But I do think that if we're going to find ways that we are going to address that we come up with an agreed upon method. For example, Ms. Alden made mention that the CCC is one county or one MPO, one voice, or one vote. It doesn't sound like we've addressed that issue for certain at this point, based on the notes I read. I mean, unless I missed something.
So
Right. So I think we do need to bring that to a future agenda and make sure that we get it done. Because if we're going to be going to funding possibly, or funding requests come the budget cycle for this year, June, September, or whatever, or approving a plan and getting the state and the feds and the transit authority on board, now's a good time to get that done. And I'd like to get some clarity on how we are going to speak with one voice in order to accomplish what we're trying to do.
Okay. Any other future items? Okay. Seeing none, we're adjourned.